We have the author of Football Done Right. That is about as perfect as he can get. And joining us on the Heister Automotive Group hotline is that author, Michael Lombardi, host of the GM Shuffle pod, former NFL front office executive, 30-plus years in the NFL, and a three-time Super Bowl champ to boot. Michael, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. I want to talk to you about the book. But first, the front office dealings, it's kind of perfect that your book is called Football Done Right, and we've been in Carolina here, maybe watching it done not the right way for the last year or maybe even more than that. When it comes to writing the Panthers, from your perspective, is it in the front office considered as important as it seems to pair a young quarterback like Bryce Young with an offensive play caller he can grow with?
Well, I think more importantly, what has to happen, and if you read any of my books, Gridiron Genius, my first book, or this book, it really comes down to the owner really understanding that his job is to set the philosophy of the team and to ask great questions and to build the team around what that philosophy is, and the owner has to do that because he's the one person who's never leaving the organization. He's there for the longest of time. And when you constantly are digging up the roots, when you just put the seeds in, you kind of have a sense that, oh man, we're not giving this enough time. And I think that's Carolina's biggest issue. I thought David Tepper was going to be a great owner. I thought David Tepper was going to be somebody who completely understood what it was like from a plan to understanding how to build a team to all those things, having Pittsburgh and the role of the organization and what has to happen, but he's kind of gone off in a different direction, one that I don't seem to understand, and one that I think, has kind of been jockeyed around. And, a guy with his wealth, you can give somebody a 6-year contract. That doesn't mean he's going to give him 6 years to do the job. Look what he did with Matt Rule. He gave him a huge contract, and then, after two and a half seasons, he was ready to throw him out the door. So a lot of it comes from what are you willing to do as an owner? What are you willing to build around, and how do you want to build a team? That's the question. If he would have interviewed me, I'm saying, look, Mr. Tepper, you tell me what kind of team you want, and I'll build that team for you. If you want to have certain guys with this kind of character, and you don't want these kind of players, or what do you want? And then we're going to go out and make sure we get that, and we're going to build a team the right way. But unfortunately, that hasn't happened there.
Is there a way to set up a buffer, right? I think a lot are expecting that from Dan Morgan, where maybe he can step in between Tepper when he wants to meddle or have daily meetings and kind of protect the Dave Canales or Brant Tillis or whoever else is making the day-to-day football decisions.
Yeah, I'm not sure that works, right? I don't see that as being an option. I think the owner has to be able to really just kind of let people do their job. And Morgan's got a big job of helping a young head coach who's never been a head coach before. He's only been an offensive coordinator for 1 year. I mean, he's got a huge job ahead of him. And Morgan's going to have to help him. Now, Morgan's got a huge job ahead of him because, look, let's be clear here. Morgan was part of the responsibility of where they are right now. I mean, he was there for every single decision. Yep. So, he's going to have to address some of those things. I didn't understand that move, but, look, I don't understand most of the NFL.
Michael Lombardi joining us on the Heister Automotive Group hotline. Check out his GM Shuffle pod and his book, Football Done Right, out now. You brought up the decisions previously. Is there a way that a assistant GM, right? Because when Dan Morgan was hired, exactly the thought you just brought up popped into all of our brains, right? He's a part of the group that got us here, and 2023 was not very fun for the Panthers. Is there a way that maybe an assistant GM isn't as responsible as you think he would be for getting the team to where it is? Like, is there a way where his role maybe was overlooked or he was ignored?
Well, he's Scott Federer's best friend. I mean, they hired him together. I would think that Scott would have listened to, he was involved in every single decision. So, I have a hard time understanding that, but he obviously convinced, the owner that he had a plan and he had everything. And now we are going to be able to evaluate how that's going to pan out, and we'll see. For me, I'm a little skeptical to say the least, but, it happens in the NFL. Guys get jobs, after they get brought in by their best friend and then they get a job. So, who knows? To me, here's the problem. There's no systems in place. There's no culture in place. None of that is in place in Carolina because there's been no attempt to do that. There's been constant change, and there's been no identity. And if Morgan can deliver that, God bless him, he's going to need to do it.
If you were looking at this, the roster, and we're talking with Michael Lombardi, former NFL front office executive, three-time Super Bowl champ, what's the priority number one? And obviously so much is about Bryce Young. Like if he's going to level up in year 2 from a roster perspective outside of, we could all say an owner with better intentions or anything else, but from a player that you could add or a position group that you could upgrade, what's priority number one?
Well, priority number one is to find out what wins in the NFL. What are the traits that teams have that win in the NFL? And building an offensive line is priority number one. They don't have a very good line. The line wasn't well designed last year. 2 years ago, they could run the ball really effectively. Last year, they couldn't even run the ball. I saw it in preseason. It was bad. It was not designed, and it wasn't James Camp and the line coach's fault. It was kind of like the way they approached it. So for me, it's about we got to build the lines. Teams that win in the NFL, it's not a strange occurrence. Teams that win because they have dominant offensive and defensive lines, and they have a quarterback who plays at a very good level within a system that is suited for his game. And that's really what happens, and that's what they need to start doing. They got to stop talking about being sexy and getting receivers and start worrying about protecting the quarterback, or else he's going to get killed.
It's put very, very well. I want to pivot just real quickly here to the coaching carousel, because we just watched it all play out, really tracking interviews here and who's getting the ideas and trying to pinpoint everything. And then Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick stay. Bill Belichick still doesn't have a job. Mike Vrabel still doesn't have a job. You worked so closely with Belichick for years, and obviously all of us, whether you work closely with him or not, understand his greatness. Why doesn't he have a job when there were 7 openings and you would expect the GOAT to have one?
Well, I think he intimidates too many people. I mean, do you really think that Dan Morgan's qualified to interview Bill Belichick?
Well, it might have been Belichick interviewing Morgan, but yeah,
I mean, there's your answer. There's your answer. I mean, do you want to hire somebody who's smarter than you? I mean, that's really what happens. Bill Walsh talked about this in 1977. The league is about guard your desk. It's about, look, Sean Payton only had one interview. Sean Payton couldn't get the Carolina job last year. It's about, people sell winning. Well, we're committed to winning. Washington's committed to winning. They haven't interviewed Belichick or Vrabel. Are you really committed to winning if you're doing that? You're taking a chance on a coach who's never been a head coach before when you got a guy who's got 6 Super Bowls in his trophy case and you got a guy like Mike Vrabel who's won games? You're going to sell this to your fan base that you're committed? This collaboration idea is funny because they all talk about collaboration. We need to be more collaborative. The 2 teams in the Super Bowl this year aren't collaborative. Both their head coaches have final say on everything they do.
We're talking with Michael Lombardi. Mike, before we get to your book, and we actually just got one here, so I look forward to reading it, and I did flip open to the Julius Peppers page just kind of randomly, which was just a nice bit of a synergy. But speaking of Julius Peppers, edge rushers are so darn important. You look at this Panthers team, they don't have a ton of pieces that a whole bunch of other teams want, but they do have a couple, one of them being Brian Burns on the edge, Derrick Brown on the inside. If you're looking at this roster, are you trying to use those pieces to maybe get back in the first round or bring in some kind of trade haul, or are those guys signed to long-term deals if you're running the show?
I learned from Al Davis a long time ago, when you have 2 good starting pitchers, you don't trade one starting pitcher to get another hitter, because now you only have one good pitcher. So when you have good players, you keep good players. And especially when you have good players at positions that matter, right? When you have good players at positions that matter, that are hard to find, you sign them, you keep them. And I'm keeping every good defensive lineman and every good offensive lineman I have on my team. I'm not letting them go. So I'll find other ways to get more assets.
Football Done Right, your book that just came out, foreword by Jim Nantz. You see McAfee on the blurbs. You see Belichick on the blurbs. What do people get when they buy this book?
Well, I think they're going to get a little bit of the history of the NFL, understanding it, the top 100 players, how television has impacted the game. They're also going to read about the great coaches of our sport, what coach is really undervalued. Marty Schottenheimer's won 200 career games, can't get into the Hall of Fame. Only one of 8 men who've won 200 games, and yet he can't get into the Hall. So it's really a history book about the NFL and the impact of people that on my life that helped me grow as a football person.
Well, if you ever want to do the deep dive into all the people that should be in the Hall of Fame, we're here for it. We've got a couple that have ties to around here. That
Call me back. We'll read the book. Sterling Sharp being number one.
There we go. Torrey Holt, Steve Smith. We got a lot of people around here that we think we could lobby for. But we appreciate it. I look forward to reading the book. Everybody go check it out. Football Done Right by Michael Lombardi. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you so much, Tim.
Once again, Michael Lombardi joining us here, putting a lot, I think, actually, and you know, as far as I'm concerned, he's not a Panthers fan of any kind. He's an executive that's worked all over the league for 30-plus years. He just very succinctly put how I believe a lot of Panthers fandom believes right now. A lot of what they're thinking, he just kind of put it on the table.
Yeah.
Which was a nice little breath of fresh air.